Thank you for hanging around at this late hour. So I'm going to be talking about the RMIT Innovation Hub, which we set up in the last few months. Are my slides in? Thank you. Which we set up in the last few months, talking about not so much the technology of the blockchain, but actually the economics and social consequences of the blockchain. So we're actually doing a social science project, not so much a computer science project. So more or less what we're looking at is 5 areas where we're going to start off obviously with economic research into the blockchain. We also want to develop some courses because we actually think there's a large gap in the market in terms of educational outcomes for blockchain. Look at applications, talk a lot about policy, and then do some data mapping around the blockchain, how it operates, and so on. It seems a lot of people are doing the observatory type stuff. We're also going to throw our hats into the ring. And we have a website, so please go and have a look at the website. And we also have a Twitter account. Now, in terms of the blockchain itself, I don't need to tell you guys, there are 5 pre-existing technologies which actually come together in order to make it work. So we have cryptography, we have peer-to-peer networking, we have databases, we have consensus algorithms, and there's been a lot of talk about these things today during the various sessions. And we also then have game theory. What seems to be missing from all of this actually is a whole lot of economics. Now, it turns out that game theory is a subsection of, or a subfield of economics, and I've seen conferences where computer scientists are doing game theory in a much, much better way than economists ever do it, but it does seem that the economics is missing. That is not enough economics in order to have a good system going along. Now, the traditional economic story tends to be around allocation decisions. And traditionally, economists worry about things like efficiency and optimization. So today, earlier on, when we were talking about reserve banks or central banks issuing fiat currencies, one of the speakers said, it's efficient. Now, I'm sure it is actually quite efficient, but it's not certainly something that I'd be doing. Now, in standard economic terms, the economic problem normally gets described in terms of what's going to be done, who's it going to do it, how's the proceeds going to be distributed, and so on. But in actual fact, there's a subfield of economics which says that is not the economic problem. The economic problem is something quite different. And the economic problem is how to coordinate economic activities when faced with distributed information and positive transactions costs. Now, that's something that comes out of Friedrich Hayek's 1944 paper. He doesn't talk about positive transaction costs per se, but certainly that's implicit in his story. Before 2009, we would have said that that happens through prices, or that happens through trusted third parties, and that happens through government regulation. After 2009, however, we can say we can coordinate economic activity when faced with distributed information and positive transaction costs through prices, trusted third parties, government regulation, and now distributed ledgers. Pardon me. And the story really is how the distributed ledgers is going to change how we resolve the economic problem. Now, the Austrian School of Economics is very much interested in distributed information and entrepreneurship. And what cryptographers call Byzantine fault tolerance, economists call robust political economy. It's the same thing. And it turns out that we've had computer scientists and economists working on similar problems for a long, long time and just simply not talking to each other or not even realizing that they had these similar problems. And that is how to provide incentives to cooperate in the presence of distributed information. And when you talk to people in the blockchain field, in industry, and the creators and what have you, you very much get a feel that they are very much aware of Austrian school economics, or certainly Hayek and Mises and so on and so forth. But our argument is that Austrian school economics is not enough. We need to add to that new institutional economics, which is made up of agency theory economics and also made up of transaction cost economics. And our argument is that the blockchain is a government structure that facilitates a nexus of contracts. Which then brings us to the question, what exactly is the blockchain? Now, a lot of economists at the moment are treating it as a general purpose technology. And they're saying it will lower costs of doing things, and that is almost certainly true. It could also be an exchange technology that lowers transaction costs. but as the university CEO said in the very first session this morning, lowering transaction costs is not actually the most interesting part of the story. The interesting part of the story to our mind is that it's an institutional technology and it lowers information costs. And it turns out that there is a very large body of economics that deals with both information costs and transaction costs associated with the work of Ronald Coase and Oliver Williamson, both of whom have won the economics Nobel for their work in this field. So transaction cost economics poses the problem of economic organization in terms of contracting and transactions. So there's a particular task to be accomplished. We can organize this task in various ways, and what we do is we work out the costs and benefits of doing it in particular ways. Before 2009, we basically had hierarchy and markets to organize transactions. Hierarchy could be government or firms, and markets we all understand. After 2009, we have government, blockchain firms, blockchain markets. And it turns out that the blockchain can actually severely disrupt government, can severely disrupt firms, and disrupt firms from both sides, actually push market forces deep into transactions that right now have to occur through the hierarchy. So, some very frightening consequences flow from that particular insight. The disruption that's going to come is going to be massive. Okay. The future for some people could be quite Orwellian. I actually experienced this morning again during the talk about payment systems, where one of the speakers was suggesting we could have digitized money with central banks, and they could take money out of our accounts or offer us different interest rates depending upon we were rich or poor or what have you. That is a very statist orientation of how a money system should work, and I have to say, if that is how the future is, I would say to all rich people right here and now, take your money now and put it onto the dark web. So I wouldn't be recommending that we have central banks that can take your money and give you different interest rates depending on how rich or poor they think you are. That is quite terrible ideas. Anyway, so the future can be very Orwellian, and we actually want to get away from that sort of thing. So firms can be thought of nexes. Now, I wasn't quite sure what the plural of nexus is, and the internet wasn't very helpful, so I just went for nexuses, which I'm sure is completely wrong. But certainly firms can be made up of nexes of short-term contracts. So we could have a whole bunch of smart contracts doing what firms currently do. That kind of means that the role of hierarchy within organizations is going to go. We won't need to have monitors. We have to ask questions then of where will the firm begin and end? Will we even have things that we understand of firms? Will this mean the end of shareholder capitalism as we know it? Very likely to put a big dent into shareholder capitalism. If we don't have a need for shareholder capitalism to get great amounts of wealth going, what's that going to mean for all our pension funds that are currently invested in the stocks of these firms? So these are challenges we need to think about. What about accountants and auditors? Well, if firms can place their income statements and balance sheets on the blockchain and have smart contracts that update them in real time, we won't need auditors, we won't need accountants, we won't need people from the tax department coming around to actually audit you to make sure you could be paying your tax in real time. We could have instantaneous bankruptcy. This morning we heard about the GFC. Now, one of the big problems during the GFC, or the financial crisis of 2008-9, was that nobody could be sure which banks were solvent and which banks were not solvent. You could set up a series of smart contracts that automatically prevents insolvent banks from trading. You could set up a series of smart contracts that instantaneously liquidate bankrupt banks. You might not want to do it in 10-minute cycles, but you might think the end of the day, the end of the week, as the case may be. So we could actually have instantaneous bankruptcy. We could operate the welfare system on a smart contract. We heard fantastic stories about logistics this afternoon. A truly blockchain financial system. What would the financial authorities do? Would we even need to have a central bank? In a system whereby you can have insolvent banks not trading, we don't need a lender of last resort. So all of these things, all of a sudden, there's going to be massive disruption, and especially around government. What about taxation? If we can't observe people's income, it seems the tax of last resort may well be a poll tax or massive surveillance over the population. What about the future of work? Well, we actually see there's going to be a superstar effect. There are going to be some people who write fantastic apps. They are going to become astonishingly wealthy. But there may be massive wealth and income inequalities within the system. What's this all going to look like? The aggregated inequality statistics may look terrible. And we think this is just the beginning. So we need to be able to have a story about how this is going to work, what's going to work, research into it, and forewarn regulators and everybody else what's coming. So the conclusion is we have a theory, Austrian school economics, which those of us in the hub are quite familiar with, and Williamson and agency theory we actually think is going to tell our story, and we have an agenda. All those things that I just mentioned we want to talk about, we want to research, we want to look into, tell a story. Keep up to date with us. We have our official university website, which being a large bureaucracy means that we can't update it as often as we like. So we have a mirror site called cryptoeconomics.com.au where we put up stuff a lot quicker than we can here. We have a Medium account where we publish some of our essays, so please have a look at our story on robust political economy, it's there. Our history of ledgers. We have Twitter accounts, blockchain at RMIT, and Cryptoeconomico. I actually wanted to make that Cryptoeconomic Oz, but unfortunately I couldn't get the Z in. So Cryptoeconomico, and that's how you can keep in touch with what we are doing. And we're going to be looking at all those questions. What impact is the blockchain going to have on the economy, on society at large, and going to have a lot of great fun while we're doing it. So thank you. Questions?
Hi, since we're talking about...
Sorry, can you wave? Yes.
Since we're talking about economics over here, I just have one really short question. How do we control the demand and supply of digital assets? Given that the old economic model with taxation and the externalities of, say, to society is not valid anymore.
So I'm not quite sure where your question is going, but I wouldn't worry too much about the demand and supply of tokens necessarily. I think this is a good thing. If we think of tokens as being an asset representing an economically valuable or viable business model, that's a good thing. And if they're not, they will go broke and disappear. So we'll actually have competition in the market. Those that are valuable will be used, and those that are not valuable won't be. It's not overly worrisome.
Okay, thank you. Let's thank the speaker.
Thank you.